All right, let's get to the story about bias in the media. There's a longtime employee of National Public Radio who's now saying that outlet is biased in a big way, and it's been getting worse in recent years. In an essay that was published today online by the Free Press, Uri Berliner, who's a senior business editor and reporter, saying NPR began to lose its way when it started telling people how to think. NewsNation media contributor Steve Krakauer joining us on this. Steve's also a columnist for The Hill. He's the author of Uncovered, How the Media Got Cozy with Power, Abandoned Its Principles, Lost the People. So it's kind of what this guy's talking about, Steve, right, a little bit. I want to put up, this is a little bit of a long excerpt, but to me, I read his piece earlier today. This, I think, encapsulates it the best or gets across his point. It's not all about just losing audience. It's about the kind of people who are listening, right, to NPR. So here it is. I've been at NPR 25 years. Here's how we lost America's trust. So let's read through this excerpt, if we could put it up on the screen, please. There on the right side, back in 2011, although NPR's audience tilted a bit to the left, it still bore a resemblance to America at large. 26% of listeners described themselves as conservative, 23% middle of the road, 37% liberal. But then he says by 2023, the picture was completely different. Only 11% described themselves as very or somewhat conservative, 21% middle of the road, and 67% of listeners, he says, said that they were very or somewhat liberal. So, what do you make of that, Steve? He's not saying it was always this way. Some people might argue it was, but he's saying, no, I've worked there and there's been a change.
It's an eye-opening piece, and frankly, it is, as you point out, a lot of what I write about in my book Uncovered, which tracks the real shift that we've seen. I think that there has been a significant change between the times of the 90s and the 2000s and the early 10s, up till about 2013, 2014. The media, I think that there's legitimate complaints about the corporate media, about the legacy media, mainstream media, however you want to describe it, but they were at least striving to get it right, at least striving to be fair and interested in presenting both sides. That's completely changed. And I do believe that obviously Donald Trump, and he was a big portion of that article, whether it's how it relates to COVID, how it relates to Hunter Biden's laptop. There are elements of that. But I believe that there's also a deeper issue when it comes to social media and the rise of how journalists can now become influencers. They can get an immense amount of feedback, both positive and negative, very easily, very quickly on social media. That can be both alluring and scary. And I think that that also really tracks with this major decline that we've seen in places like NPR and elsewhere.
Okay, that's interesting. I think you're right probably about that. And I think I don't think it's all on the left. I think you could see some of that on the right. But I also think that the Trump part is a good point that you also have seen, and Fox is an example of this, have an impact on the right. But this guy thinks it had an impact at NPR, that Trump did. That's the second excerpt I want to share with you from his piece. He says what began as tough, straightforward coverage of, as he describes Trump, a belligerent, truth-impaired president, veered towards efforts to damage or topple Trump's presidency. So you think about, there's definitely a Trump effect in all of this. So you were saying maybe it's more than that, but it's there, right?
I think it's undoubtedly there. And, you know, it actually reminds me a little bit, Connell, back in the end of 2022. So this is, 18 months ago, but still well within this period of time that is in this NPR piece. I was one of the 11,000 or so journalists that participated in a Pew survey that asked a lot of questions about the industry. And then they also asked regular Americans who are not journalists what they thought on a variety of questions. And there's some really eye-opening data in there. You can look it up at Pew. 76% of non-journalists who were surveyed said that journalists should always strive to give every side equal coverage. Only 44% of journalists actually believe that in 2022, and only 30% of journalists who work at quote-unquote left-leaning outlets, and NPR would be included in that, believe that that sentiment is true, should strive to give each side equal coverage. That is a huge shift. That is essentially the job of a journalist. And yet most people who work at these organizations like NPR no longer believe that. And most importantly, Americans believe they should believe that.
Okay,
so that is where you see this big divide.
Number one, I do think that there is a challenge that Trump presents there when there is information that he's putting out, or say an election that he lost that he's trying to overturn, that there isn't another side to that, so that it does make it difficult, right? I think there are challenges. Now, your point's well taken, but I think there are challenges. Thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.